We started by marking and cutting this piece of wood right in half. This will make it a lot easier to work with. We then marked and cut 3 pieces at 16 inches. We then marked and cut 1 piece at 12 inches. Here are the 3 16-inch pieces and 1 12-inch piece all cut. Next, we set up our table saw to 5.5 inches wide. Each 16-inch piece will get ran through, as well as the 12-inch piece. Then for our next cut, we readjusted our table saw to 3 15/16. Only grabbing our 16-inch pieces for this, we placed the nicely cut square end along the fence of the table saw. We readjusted the table saw one last time to 4.5 inches. Only grabbing our 12-inch pieces for this one, we are running those through with the nice square side along the fence. Grabbing our palm sander, we used 100 grit sandpaper to sand all 4 sides as well as the 2 ends of the pieces of wood. Now it's time to clean off the boards so they are ready to get stained. Using a microfiber cloth or a tack cloth, we wipe down each board. When it comes to staining, I like to wear gloves. We are using the color dark walnut for this, but you can use any color you like. After giving your stain a nice stir, it is time to apply. Now there are multiple ways you can apply stain, but this is my preferred method, using a foam brush. You can also use a regular paintbrush. Grabbing a rag I had on hand, I wiped off the excess stain that wasn't needed. Once all the boards were stained and fully dry, it was time to apply the top coat. I like to apply a top coat using a brush. This gives me the smoothest finish. I applied this to as many sides as I could, let it dry, and then flipped it over, and then applied it to the remainder of the board. Once it was completely dry, I lightly sanded with 220 grit sandpaper. Once that second top coat is dry, we are ready to assemble. Coming in 3/4 of an inch from the end, and 1 inch from each edge of each piece of wood, we use our speed square to make a mark. You then repeat the same process on this other end. We placed our speed square 3/4 of an inch in. From there, we find the very edge of each individual board and place a mark 1 inch in. This will leave 6 marks on this end and 6 marks on the other end. This is where the future screws will be going. Grabbing the 2 12-inch pieces as well as 1 16-inch piece, we will start to assemble. Once everything is lined up nice and flush, we find our first mark that we previously made and drill a pilot hole. Using our impact driver, we place a 2.5-inch deck screw. For now, we just have the 2 screws in place. Grabbing another 16-inch board, making sure it's lined up nice and flush with the 12-inch pieces, we then will drill 1 pilot hole in this corner and then place the screw. We wanted to check our spacing, so we grabbed another 16-inch piece and placed it in the middle. Once we confirmed our spacing was fine, we drilled another pilot hole and placed another screw. It is now time to attach these hairpin legs that I found on Amazon. We placed these 3/8 of an inch in from the side and the front. We then drilled 4 pilot holes, only going down about an inch. Now don't be like us. You would normally place a piece of tape on your drill bit to know when to stop drilling. And now we could secure the leg using the provided screws that came with it. This makes for the perfect size nightstand with a little shelf in the middle for extra storage.
I've got a laundry problem. Too much to do and nowhere to store it. So I'm going to head down to my hardware store and I'm going to grab some good lumber. A 1x3 and 1x2s. Make sure you get them pretty straight. On 2 of these 8-foot boards, we're going to mark them right in half, a little bit above the 4-foot mark. Then I'm going to cut them. Now, we're going to set 2 of these legs aside because we're going to work on one side at a time. Take these 2 legs, separate them, and then we're going to start building a box. As you can see, I'm going to use glue. Glue is so strong compared to screws or nails. So what you do is you take good wood glue, you separate it out, put the board on top, and I'm just going to use little brad nails to hold it in place. This is going to allow the glue to dry, and it's going to be super strong. We're going to box this out, and then once we get the 2 sides built, we're going to measure the basket, and it comes out to about 24 inches. As you can see, that's how we have to separate it. Build the top and the bottom, again using the 1x3s. Just use these, and this could be a one-person job if you use a clamp to hold it in place on one side. Now, as you can see, the box is starting to form. If it's a little bit off, don't worry. We'll take care of that when it comes to sanding. We'll go on the other side, again using glue and a little bit of brad nails. Now it's time to build the top. Again, using 1x3s on the top, I'm going to do 5 of these. Again, as you can see, I got glue. Now it's time to build the racks and the sliders that the baskets will go on. I'm going to put some glue down again along the sides as I measure it out for 3 baskets, all equal sizes up and down. This one doesn't use a 1x3, uses a 1x2. We'll put this in place again with glue and using the brad nails to hold it in place. See that little bevel I put on the side? That's so it doesn't catch the basket. Here's the top. You can see the 5 slots that I put in. Now this is the facial board that I'm going to put in. It fits really nice, but we want to hold it in place again. This is where we can put little letterings or signs on. Using the brad nail, hold it in place. Once we do that, it's time to sand. Now, the reason you want to sand is it takes stain and everything better. But I've got a secret. We're not going to use stain on this. I'm going to use something different, but don't be intimidated. We're going to use a torch. That's right. We're going to burn this wood and give it a special look. As you can see here, I'm showing you that it can go too fast and it won't do the job. What you got to do when you're using a torch, don't be nervous, go a little bit slower. See how when we do that, it brings the grain out? It doesn't burn all the wood. It just takes that wood grain and really sets it apart, giving it a very dark look. Now, it looks like it could possibly be burning the wood. That's only temporary. It just gives it a nice shine, and then you can finish it off with some poly. Now, here is the final project. I used my Cricut machine, put a laundry symbol on it, and decorated it up, and it turned out amazing. 3 baskets tall and a little shelf on top to hold things. There's that bevel right there so the baskets don't get caught when I'm putting them on. And look at that. You can barely see any of the nails because we use glue to hold it together. With all the laundry in, it's still super strong. And it slides in and out with ease. It's great for the family, and they absolutely loved it. Laundry time now doesn't have to be a chore. I hope this inspired you to build your own DIY laundry basket rack.
Head to Home Depot and get this board. Now it's time to get started on this project. First, I laid the board on a flat surface and began tracing an organic shape following the wood grain all the way around the board. Next, I secured the board to my work surface using a couple of clamps, then used a jigsaw to cut out the shape I traced. Once the board was cut, I used my orbital sander to sand both sides of the board, starting with 100 grit sandpaper and working up to 220 grit sandpaper. After sanding was complete, I wiped the board down well, then applied 2 coats of gel stain in the color hickory to both sides of the board according to the directions on the can. Once the board was dry, I applied 2 coats of a satin polyurethane, again according to the directions on the can, making sure to sand in between coats with 220 grit sandpaper. Head over to your local Walmart garden center or go to walmart.com and grab 4 of these $10 planters. First, I wiped the rims of the planters with a clean cloth. Then I applied an even layer of a strong construction adhesive on the rim of one planter. Next, I flipped the second planter upside down and placed it on top of the planter with the adhesive. Once the adhesive was dry, I used a dark wood filler to fill in the gaps between the planters and then allowed them to dry again. Once dry, I used 220 grit sandpaper to sand the bowls and the wood filler down. My goal for sanding was to remove the shiny texture from the planters and to make the wood filler seamless. I allowed the planters to dry for a few hours, then used a chip brush and the same gel stain I used for the board to create a faux wood grain effect on the planters. I applied the construction adhesive to the tops of the planters, then smoothed it out in an even layer with a foam brush. I placed the wooden board on top, making sure it was centered on the planters, then weighed it down with heavy books and allowed the adhesive to dry for 24 hours. Now I have a beautiful coffee table that is the perfect addition to my living room. I hope that this inspired you to make your very own coffee table.
I got so tired of all the mess at the front door, so I grabbed a 1x3 pine board and cut it at 48 inches. These are going to be the rails for my next project. I'm going to go ahead and run the tape measure out. I'm going to do a marking right at the end at 16 inches, 24 inches, 32 inches, and 40 inches. I need to drill these so I can put some dowels in them for supports, but I'm going to line all 3 boards up so I can get the same markings. Once I got the markings on there, I'm going to measure and mark the middle of the board. Using a drill bit that's 1/4 inches wide, I'm going to drill through them on each one of those lines in the center of the board. Next, I got to build the shelves. I'm going to cut all of these at 11 to 11 and a quarter each. Now, my saw doesn't go all the way through. So once I make those cuts, I'm going to flip the board over and then finish cutting each one of these. Then I'm going to line all the shelves up and mark at 5.5 inches, which is the middle of the boards. Again, using my speed square, I'm going to run a line, and then I've got to drill a hole, but I don't want the drill to go too deep. So at the 1 inch mark, I'm going to put a piece of tape. That's going to give me a stopper and tell me when to stop drilling. So I drill down. Right when the tape hits, I pull it back out. And I'm going to do this in the middle of my lines on each of the boards on 3 sides. Once I got the holes marked, it's time to insert the dowels. But I'm not going to use those grooved dowels. I want a smooth piece of wood. It's going to look a lot better. I'm going to go ahead and put some glue on each end of the dowel. Just run that wood glue in there and on that end, and then put it right down inside. It'll slide right inside there. You're going to do this to all the holes and all 3 sides. Now I'm going to go ahead and take that first board on the railing and I'm going to push it through. Once I start getting the shelves on, it actually goes pretty easy. Just look under, line them up, and just using a mallet with light taps, I'm going to push them all through. Now, if they come out too far, you can just sand them down, or you can just use a flat saw like this, cut it down, and use a sandpaper and get it nice and smooth. As you can see, you can't even see it. Next, I want to put a railing on the top with a little bit of the scrap wood I have left. That way I can put some items onto my top shelf. I'm trying to go as nailless and screwless as possible, so I'm using clamps and glue to hold it in place. If I have any excess glue, just wipe it off. Next, because it's pine, I want to pre-stain the boards. This is a simple and inexpensive way to do it, and it makes the staining look really good. I'm going to let it dry for about 40 minutes to an hour, and then I'm going to apply the stain. This one's called Colonial Maple. I think it has a nice shiny color to it, but not too dark. Once I get that stain all on, I'm going to put it all over the shelves and the sides, and you can see the dowel there. I'm going to bring that thing inside and start time to clean it up. I can put all my shoes on there, including a longer shelf at the bottom for my boots. And here's the top shelf. Remember those sides? Holds it up, and I put a rack on it to hold my backpack. I think this shoe tower turned out great. I hope this inspired you to build your own pine wood shoe tower. Thank you for watching Home Talk, and we'll catch you next time.